So in terms of the funding specifically that Max has mobilized, we're looking at well over $170 million that we've mobilized directly and through our partnerships. But that is nowhere near the biggest achievement for us. Money is ultimately a function of what you do with it.
And then one of our drivers there at the time, I think his name is Mike Adetayo, calls me and says, oh, his wife wanted to talk to me. They moved from living in a shop in Ikoton that was, shop and parlor and everything to their family, where they were surviving on less than 30K a month, to renting a 3-bedroom apartment in Ogun State. They had butland, they were building, all that stuff. This was on an Okada income in Lagos at the time. I have not fought tears back that hard in a very long time. Because I said, this is why we're doing this.
Can you just tell the audience your name? How would you describe your role? Okay. And how would you describe what you're building at Max?
Fantastic. So my name is Chinedu Azodoh. I'm co-founder and now president at Max, aka Metro Africa Xpress.
My name is Adetayo Bamiduro. I'm co-founder and CEO at Max. Started as a co-founder, but right now as CEO, it pretty means I'm chief everything officer, right? Just trying to build the company, trying to support people, provide inspirational leadership, visioning and all that to make sure that the company is successful, the people are successful, and ultimately that the mission of the company is achieved. So that's pretty much my role.
The role of the president so far, I've been focused on the future of Max. We have a new division called New Ventures. So build out for the drivers, build out for our customers. How do we continue to deliver the kind of service we want to? I also support a lot of our leadership teams today.
You're running a business in Nigeria, and we all know how challenging that is, especially with government policies. How have you been able to, work with those policies, especially sometimes knowing that they can be restrictive in a way?
Something I've come to learn is, for where Nigeria is as the country, the way the government tends to respond is not any different from how a lot of other country governments tend to respond. So the question now becomes, as a business, how do you operate in this kind of space and, help drive progression?
I'd say 10 years ago, I thought Nigeria was extremely challenging. Now, I still think it's challenging, but with the benefit of, having experienced the other markets, you then see, okay, this is where Nigeria is strong, this is where Nigeria is weak. The challenging part of Nigeria is the fact that there's a lot of infrastructure gaps, right? So, your own power, you have to provide your own gen and all of that, which can be really stressful.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, Nigerians are also very intense and very generally aggressive, which for the most part is actually a good thing in business because it means people are smart, people are sharp, people are quick. If they like a product, they'll go for it fast. If they don't like it, they'll dump it and you get that feedback very quickly. Unlike some other parts of the continent where people are a lot more docile, and I would not mention names, right? Where people are just a lot more chill and, you have to really, really motivate them to get them moving. So Nigeria does have its own benefits. But in terms of the operating environment, even from a regulatory standpoint, there are other markets that we've looked at that we're working in right now that have much heavier regulation than you actually have in Nigeria. So yes, regulation can be a challenge sometimes in Nigeria, but overall, it's not, Nigeria is quite open for business, right? Unlike, some other markets where, people look at you and in Nigeria, if you have value to provide, it doesn't matter if you're from Portugal or Australia, Nigerians will do business with you. But in other parts of the world, some other parts of the world, it's not exactly like that. So Nigeria is actually very exciting to do business in. But the infrastructure challenges and then, lately a bit of security challenges as well, sometimes can be a bit of a headache. But overall, it is definitely a market that is too exciting to be ignored by anyone who really wants to build a big business.
In Lagos, around January of 2020, there was a ban on motorcycles, and recently there was another ban of some sort. How has this impacted Max as a business, and how have you scaled through something like that?
Yeah, the ban is the ban, right? The government is doing what the government thinks needs to be done. I think very vocal, aggressive public fight doesn't help change any narrative, as it were, right? What essentially happens is people just entrench deeper in their opinions because they feel slighted or whatever the case may be.
So you still have motorcycles moving up and down Lagos. It's just that they're doing deliveries, they're not moving people. So what the Lagos government did was to restrict the usage of motorcycles to logistics only, to deliveries only within 6 local governments.
Okay.
So in the other local governments as well, motorcycles were still free to do their transport, normal taxi business, as long as they weren't getting on the highways, right? But at that point in time, it still impacted on us because a good number of the drivers that we had on our platform were doing the taxi business within those 6 local government areas where the restriction was imposed. So it did affect us, it did affect our drivers, but we pretty much just reconfigured our business around that in Lagos to say, okay, we'll focus purely on package delivery and logistics, which is something that we've always done anyway.
So I think the government is doing what the government thinks it needs to do, right? Whether that's right or wrong, I don't think it's relevant. The question is, where the people are today, is that where the people will be in 5 years, or where the people will be in 3 years? And how do governments and how do organizations like us who, provide a public good, how do we continue to work with both the government and the populace to deliver something that makes sense for everyone long term?
You said something about working with the government. I was watching an interview. There was something with the Ekiti State government.
Yeah.
That was like a partnership.
Yes. So,
and I was just wondering, like, how is that going? How do you think governments should ideally partner with companies like Max?
That's a fantastic question. The Ekiti State partnership, I think, has gone well. So we built a product called MetroGov, and we deployed in both Ekiti State and Oyo State. And what we've seen is that with some of the growing insecurity and all those kind of things across the country, not just country, across sub-Saharan Africa, and the lack of identity, what you find is that in the informal space, especially in the transport sector, the identity issues are worse, right? Because you have a lot of people who are mobile, don't have ID cards, you don't really know who they are, they kind of come and go and all those kind of things. And for governments, those are becoming significant problems. And these are the kind of things that also lead to some of the issues we see with bans and all those kind of things. How do you solve for identity? So when there's an issue, you actually know who to hold accountable. So in Ekiti State, we did a really amazing partnership with the government where we went out there and built technology, deployed it, and helped the state actually register, I think, about 8,000 to 9,000 drivers. And the idea now is within the state, they have an ID system. They're able to use that for taxation. They're able to use that for collections. They use that for a ton of things around. Like, even I know that the government had wanted to distribute money to like some people in the transport sector as a way of rewarding good behavior. And that ID system played a massive role in that process because they were able to use that to identify who they wanted to give money to or give incentives to, who they had already given to. So they were able to get rid of things like double counting and fraud and all those kinds of things.
What is Max's relationship with the drivers like, and how would you define the culture? It's
taking quite a bit of reorientation for a lot of people because, we live in an environment, and going back to your initial question around the challenges, we live in an environment where, the lower you are in terms of your income level or quote unquote your status level, the less respect you get. That's kind of like how our society has evolved over the last couple of years, which is unfortunate. So changing that mindset, within the team as well, and every single person that we hire, when we bring them on board, the first thing is, at Max, the driver, we call them champions. The champion is king, right? Or queen. So we are here to support them because they are our customers. It's a service relationship where we do whatever it takes to help them succeed. That's our goal here. Their success ultimately is our success. So that's the kind of culture that we've built here. The most important thing actually is the elevation in their dignity. So all of a sudden, yesterday you are an Okada rider. The next day you're a Max champion, right? That change in psyche is extremely valuable for them. Because suddenly they get a lot more respect in their communities. They know if they get into trouble, they can call someone. How it is in Nigeria. Do you know who I am? Right?
So today we support north of 14,000 drivers across different products. Wow, that's a lot. We support north of 14,000 drivers.
14,000 families.
Yeah, 14,000 families. I mean, the average family size is what, 7, right? We also do a lot of work beyond vehicle subscriptions. We do a lot of work for the drivers. So we provide health insurance, accident insurance. We provide insurance to cover their passengers in the case that there's an accident. We provide customized health insurance where drivers are able to go above and beyond themselves and what they normally do to provide health insurance to their family members. So a lot of these things are done and bundled in a way that is sustainable for these guys and helps them succeed long term. Yeah.
What is it like in terms of earnings now for drivers?
I mean, the drivers make a lot more money than people also realize. Drivers in a market like Lagos, the average guy is taking home between 15 and 20k a day, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week. That's good money, right? It's hard work.
Definitely more than minimum wage.
It's several times minimum wage,
yeah.
Right? In markets like tier 2 markets, tier 3 markets, you see drivers making between 7 to like 12k depending on the kind of vehicle they drive, depending on the kind of market that they're in. For me, I think it's very exciting.
Max Safety is a brand on its own. Why was that important for Max?
Safety is extremely important. Motorcycle accidents around the continent are still one of the leading causes of death for young people. And it's easily resolved. Once you actually wear a helmet and you strap it in properly, the chances that an accident will happen or be fatal is reduced by 70%. Very, very huge. At Max, safety is one of our core values, extremely important. The drivers and our customers, we're constantly implementing campaigns to drive that mindset. It's also one of the challenges in Nigeria. anyhowness, right? You know, we a lot of our people don't factor in safety into how they do things on a regular basis.
Something else I saw was the low to zero emission vehicles that you're working on. Why was it important that Max had to, you know, champion something like this, and what are some of the benefits maybe?
That's a great point. If you think about global warming and pollution and all this stuff, while sub-Saharan Africa is not one of the largest polluters, we suffer some of the heaviest consequences. If you think about the prevalence of things like asthma, bronchitis, and other kind of respiratory diseases, right? And even beyond that, you're thinking about long-term, you know, if you look at Lake Chad and how that has continued to dry up year after year, what does global warming do to feeding cycles and how we eat? What impact does it have on longevity of the planet? What impact does it have on quality of life? All those kinds of things are what we're thinking about, right? And while not being one of the largest polluters, we suffer a lot from it, right? Something has to be done. We go low to zero emission because we're looking at how do we start to deploy vehicles that are good for us. But
beyond the emissions and the climate impact also is the financial impact. It's really just 4 parts. It's a battery, right? It's an electric motor, electric controller, which is like a brain box, right? And then the chassis, the rest of the body. It's really 4 components, right? Unlike a petrol engine that has like 1,000, you know, or even 10,000 moving parts. If you think about the total cost of ownership, not just the cost of purchase, but the cost of maintenance over 5-7 years, electric motorcycles and tricycles are way cheaper than gas engines. So from an economic standpoint as well, it makes a lot of sense to drive that transition, and that's what we're pioneering.
What is the potential for what Max is building for Africa? I know throughout the course of this conversation, you've mentioned Nigeria. In terms of like the potential, how do you see Max being placed in the future?
We want to get a vehicle in the hand of every commercial driver on the continent. We want them to be able to work independently and deliver value for themselves. In the motorcycle space, less than 30% of the market has consistent access to a vehicle. In the car space, less than 10% of the market has consistent access to vehicles, right? Because what we've learned is, you know, I had a conversation earlier today where, you know, the guys were speaking with were saying that, you know, the challenge they see with Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, is the GDPs of the countries are growing, but the GDP per capita of the people are not growing. That the economies are growing, but the people are not getting wealthier. The reality is, or for me, my thesis around that is fundamentally, the countries might be doing better, but the people one, don't have access to credit, and 2, a lot of what's happening is also not flowing into our digital systems.
Okay, so the goal is to even aid that financial independence and grow that, maybe, you know, not necessarily grow, but at least make some sort of impact in that GDP per capita base.
So our approach is the bottom-up approach. By solving the problem for a lot of the folks who are quote-unquote at the bottom of the pyramid, we will help improve the value of the pyramid and therefore grow the economies of different countries as well.
So I was reading something and I was just fascinated. Max has raised 64 million. What would you say is the biggest achievement that Max has?
That's a fantastic question. So in terms of the funding specifically that Max has mobilized, you know, roughly around $70 million on equity and debt, directly with Max, but through our strategic partnerships, some of our OEM partners that are deploying and financing vehicles on our platform. Right now, it's in excess of $100 million. It's not just the funding that Max itself is raising, it's the partnerships that we've built and creating a new distribution framework, right, for other OEMs out there to be able to deliver their vehicles to drivers that need them, right? So in total, we're looking at well over $170 million that we've mobilized directly and through our partnerships. But that is nowhere near the biggest achievement for us. You know, money is ultimately a function of what you do with it, right? You know, we know that they're extremely, incredibly wealthy people, but who haven't made any impact, right? And we know of people who have raised very little money, but have delivered amazing impact in their communities.
And then one of our drivers there at the time, I think his name is Adetayo, calls me and says, oh, his wife wanted to talk to me. They'd moved from living in a shop in Ikoto that was, you know, shop and parlor and everything to their family, where they were surviving on less than 30K a month, to renting a 3-bedroom apartment in Ogun State. They had bought land, they were building, all that stuff. This was on an Okada income in Lagos at the time. That for me was very powerful and very emotional, right? I worked hard not to, I have not fought tears back that hard in a very long time, right? And I remember, and for me, it stuck with me, right? Because I said, this is why we're doing this. we're not doing this for all the story of tech boys and raising money and all that stuff.
I can imagine.
Those things are honestly not important. The reason why we're doing this is to have a transformative impact on the quality of life of people.
What does it typically cost a business on average to use Max?
So to access our vehicle subscription product, it can cost as low as $3 to $5 a day.
Okay.
Depending on the kind of vehicle and what city we're operational in. So for $3 to $5 a day, you can access a vehicle subscription and have it do all the delivery runs that you need.
I know you talked about the fact that there were more orders for food,
Yeah.
for the food delivery than there were riders. There were more orders for rides on Max.
So essentially, there's always more orders than everybody could meet, right? And so for us,
do you see that flipping now?
not even remotely. We're not anywhere near a potential flip, right? For a flip to happen, you have to get closer to demand meeting supply. Demand by far outstrips supply, right? People talk about how logistics is such an easy business to get into in Nigeria. Everybody can get into it because there's so much demand for it, right? But people also struggle because, scaling logistics becomes a nightmare. Right?
Yeah.
It's a very difficult process to do. What we've learned is that the infrastructure is really what drives this stuff. So, we've really stepped back a lot from doing logistics, doing ride hailing, doing any of these things. And we just focus on building the infrastructure to help the drivers succeed. So even all the insurance, the driver services, the maintenance, the vehicle subscription, licensing, all that stuff. That's kind of what we focus on to ensure that for the drivers, the availability is critical. So they have that availability and therefore they can kind of go on and make money. So we work with platforms now as well. So we work with all the Bold, we work with Boda, different companies. Obviously, we're also a platform. So for us, we're not interested in competing with all these guys. The goal for us is continue to augment and support what they do to help them be successful, help our drivers be successful, and at the end, they were also successful from the process.
Cool. Yeah. I want to go more along the line of the path to building Max now. Okay. How was it like from your previous employment, business school, and coming up with the idea of Max? How was the journey?
How much time do we have for this question?
Just a very abridged version.
All right, great. So before Max, I was working in the US, right? So I think just before leaving to MIT Sloan, where we then started Max from, I was at a company called Barclays Capital. While I loved what I did and I thought it was super exciting, I felt like that wasn't my calling. I wanted to be able to be back here on the continent, making change. I said, why? So I made the decision to leave my job. And I remember telling my parents I was going to be moving back to Nigeria. I'm like, wait, what? Right? You don't spend all that money for people to go to college to come back to Nigeria so quickly. They gave me really good advice, which was essentially go get a graduate degree before you come back. So, I applied to a bunch of schools, gone into MIT Sloan, and I've always loved MIT. I love the storytelling around the school. I love what the school stands for, the mission, all that stuff. And then I met Tayo along the journey. At the time, I'd been focused on building out a business that was looking at the mother and child. And then I hit a roadblock, which was how do you deliver things in Nigeria? So I had a friend of mine who was a Sloaney, Bengaiki. I reached out to Benga, like, yo, look, I'm thinking of this particular issue, not sure how to solve it. What's your advice? He's like, oh, there's a dude you should talk to. His name is Tayo Bamiduro. He was just at Conga, helped them run the logistics business, and I know he's super interested in that space. And that's how Tayo and I connected, and the rest they kind of see is history.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting journey. I'd say, when I left school, I went to school in Nigeria. I did my undergrad here at the University of Ibadan. I did computer science. So I started building and playing around with applications right from school. And then right after school, I started building software for a few friends and then for a couple of businesses. But after then, I thought I wanted a proper corporate experience, not just going all the way into full-fledged entrepreneurship right out of school. So I worked in a bunch of industries. I did management consulting for a little bit. I did energy as well, natural gas. And then after a while, I thought, okay, I wanted to do more with tech. And I knew that the career path that I was on wouldn't really take me to the direction that I wanted. But at the same time, I also, wanted to do something that would have a lot of impact to it in terms of helping to create jobs and solve some of the big development challenges that we have in Africa. So I got, lucky. I did a 2-year graduate degree and MBA at MIT, which is where I met with Chinedu. And it was while I was there, that happened that it was the time when a lot was going on in the mobility space in the US. Uber and Lyft were going head to head at that point in time. Alibaba also was on a tier, right? You know, in Asia, doing incredible things with Alipay and so on. So we kind of like Chinedu got together and figured that, okay, we could do something similar in Africa, right? So we started playing around with the Max idea in 2014. And then ultimately in 2015, we launched. We got into an accelerator called Techstars in New York. And then we raised a bit of funding. We did TechCrunch Disrupt in London, same year, 2015. And then 2016, we went full-fledged, started building out Max in Nigeria. And then we've gone through, of course, quite an incredible journey over the last 7 years building Max. But that was the journey.
So now, if we're going to talk to young Nigerians watching this, like, what would you advise them to do? Like, if they want to start something in Nigeria and they don't want to mess things up,
okay,
like, what would you advise a young Nigerian watching this to think about?
I think it's very important to have a clear line of sight as to what your real objective is. Why are you doing this? If the hustle is to make money, if what you're doing is just to make money, it's cool. But like, beyond money, what is your other objective? If you don't have a clear objective, your objective is
money,
to make money,
it would be the same.
You will suffer. Suffer doesn't need to finish.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say biggest thing is recognizing that life isn't a straight line, right? You have a dream that you're pursuing. At some point, you would suffer setbacks, sometimes very severe setbacks that will make you look like all of this is worthless. And in those moments, there's this deep temptation to kind of like just give up and say, you know what, I can't succeed. My advice is not to listen to that voice, right? Is even if one door is closed somewhere, another door can open somewhere else, right? If you're resilient and you pick yourself back up and you keep going. A lot of people look at, folks who maybe succeeded in one way or the other and think that, those people succeeded because they're extremely special. And the short answer is no, they are not, right? They just kept going. That's really it. Of course, there are those who are just privileged from day one. I'm not talking about those people, right?
Okay.
I'm talking about those who didn't necessarily have any kind of privilege, but they started grinding from day one and they stuck to it. They kept pushing forward in the face of adversity. So my short message to young Nigerians and young Africans is keep going, right? If you get punched in the face, right, you pick yourself back up again and you keep going. You don't give up. You don't say there's no more hope. If you're resilient and you keep going long enough, you will break through.